This is week 2 of Spokane's very first televised civics competition, Civics Bowl. The stakes are higher this year as 10 Spokane area high schools test their knowledge on all things government and politics.
The Civics Bowl is made possible by Eastern Washington University, Canopy Credit Union, the Avista Foundation, the League of Women Voters of the Spokane area and of Washington, and by viewers like you.
We need to let you know about a change to the tournament schedule. Rogers High School and Central Valley High School were originally scheduled to meet in week 2. However, due to weather and scheduling conflicts, Rogers unfortunately had to drop out of the tournament this season. That means Central Valley advances to play North Central in a few weeks, and we're moving ahead to Ridgeline versus Lewis and Clark this week. We want to thank Rogers for their hard work preparing for the season, and we hope to see them next year. Let's check out the bracket. Today's matchup is between Ridgeline High School and Lewis and Clark High School. Let's meet each team now. Ridgeline, start us off.
Hi, I'm Parker.
Hi, I'm Pressida.
Jacob.
Hi, I'm Elise.
And we want to also welcome Ridgeline's alternate Hannah and their coach Brittany Bergman. And now, Lewis and Clark.
Hi, my name is Varun.
Hi, my name is Arun.
Hi, I'm Molly.
I'm Owen.
And in the audience, we have LC's alternate Sylvie and their coach Megan Gomez. Let's get started with the toss-up round. In this round, I'll ask a toss-up question to all players. You must wait until I finished reading the question, then you can buzz in to answer. Whichever team answers the toss-up question correctly will receive a bonus question. All questions in this round are worth 10 points. There is no deduction for wrong answers. You're allowed to collaborate with your teammates only on the bonus question. Teams, are you ready? Let's begin. What do you call a group of people who seek to control government through winning elections and holding public office? Varun.
Political party.
That is correct, and here's your bonus. Name one major function of a political party.
To put candidates together to compete in elections.
That is correct. Here's your toss-up. The two-party system in the United States is rooted in the nation's beginnings. Which two opposing sides, essentially political parties, emerged during the ratification of the Constitution? Varun.
The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. Following ratification, the framers hoped to heal the breach between these two factions. Who expressed that political parties were agents of divisiveness in his farewell address?
George Washington.
That is correct. Okay, here's your next toss-up, and it's a multiple choice question. In which year was the first televised national political convention? A, 1920, B, 1940, C, 1960, D, 1992. Jacob.
C, 1960.
That is incorrect. Molly.
B, 1940.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. Which party hosted this first televised convention?
The Democratic Party.
It was the Republican Party. Here's your next toss-up. Initially in 1789, what group of people had the power to vote in the United States? Jacob.
White male landowners.
That would be correct. Here's your bonus. Federal law has gradually eliminated restrictions on the right to vote. Name 3 eliminated restrictions.
Age, race, and sex. The expanding age, race, and sex.
That is incorrect. A religious belief, property ownership, tax payment, race, gender, and literacy. Here's your toss-up. Which amendment protects citizens from being denied the right to vote because of race or color? Parker.
The 15th.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What was the initial weakness in the 15th Amendment?
The 15th Amendment did not address gender.
That is incorrect. Not self-executing, just started as a general principle. Here's your next toss-up. Whose arrest led to the 1955-56 Montgomery bus boycott? Varun.
Rosa Parks.
That is correct. And here's your bonus. What was the outcome of the boycott?
Desegregated buses. The city desegregated public busing.
That is correct. Here's your next toss-up, and we have a guest presenter for you.
Hi, I'm local novelist Sharma Shields, author of the Sasquatch Hunter's Almanac. Here's your question. In 1972, what law ended discrimination on the basis of gender in public and private schools receiving federal funds?
Arun?
Title IX.
That is correct. And here is your bonus.
When was the Equal Rights Amendment, which stated that equality of rights shall not be denied or abridged by any state on account of sex, added to the U.S. Constitution?
It was never ratified and added to the Constitution.
That is correct. Here's your toss-up. In what year was the income tax authorized by the 16th Amendment? Arun?
Was it 1911?
That is incorrect. Ridgeline? Jacob?
1914?
1913. 1913. Okay, here's your next toss-up. Give one example of a state tax that an individual may pay. Arun?
A sales tax?
That is correct. The others are personal property tax, income tax, gas tax, and vehicle licensing. And here's your bonus. Which of these state taxes do Washington residents not currently have to pay? A, personal property, B, sales tax, C, income tax, D, gas tax.
C, income tax?
That is correct. And now, here's your next toss-up with another video.
Hi, I'm Sherry McMahon, president of Eastern Washington University. Go Eagles! Here's your question. EWU is a regional public university. However, we are state-assisted rather than state-supported. That means that only about 30% of our operating budget is provided by state appropriations. Two other areas are critical to our funding. Name one.
Jacob?
Tuition?
That is correct. And here's your bonus.
Thanks to the generous network of donors and alumni, we are proud to be able to provide financial aid to 75% of applicants who apply. What is the name of the form you must fill out to apply for federal aid?
The FAFSA form?
That is correct. Here's your toss-up. What do economists call a system in which private enterprises and government enterprises coexist in the market? Arun?
A mixed economy?
That is correct. And here's your bonus. Is the construction of North-South Freeway in Spokane by the Washington Department of Transportation an example of a free market system or a mixed economic system?
Mixed economic system?
That is correct. And that's the end of the round. Great jobs, team. After round one, the Lewis and Clark 130, Ridgeline 40. We'll be back in a moment to get to know the players, play the head-to-head round.
Here's the answer to last week's question. Mount Rushmore is carved out of granite, which erodes roughly 1 inch every 10,000 years. Since each president's nose is about 240 inches long, how long might they last before completely wearing away? The correct answer is C. Each president's nose won't erode away for 2.4 million years. And at this rate, the basic shape of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln's heads might last up to 7 million years. Numerous things are being done to preserve Mount Rushmore. Camouflaged wire was installed to help monitor hairline cracks, and a high-tech LED lighting system minimizes the negative effects of lighting the mountain. Stay tuned. This week's question is coming up later in the show.
It's time to get to know our players a little better and let them show off their school pride. We've asked each school to produce a video for Civics Bowl. Let's start with the video from Ridgeline.
We are Ridgeline High School, home of the Falcons.
Here at Ridgeline, we strive to go big, belong, inspire, grow.
We make students feel they belong here through our many clubs, school-wide activities, and class competitions, such as Verde Logo.
Ridgeline students can feel inspired by our athletics and our after-school activities, such as our award-winning marching band, and our state-bound sports.
Growth is inspired through our amazing academics, where students have access to multiple APs, core courses, and fun CTEs.
Talent up!
Now it's time to meet our friends from Ridgeline. Ridgeline, tell us your rank and your favorite subject. Parker.
Yeah, I'm a junior, and I'm a band kid, so band is my favorite subject.
Cressida.
I am a sophomore, and I'd have to say orchestra.
Jacob.
I'm a senior, and so whichever has the least homework, I'd say, at the time, you know?
My man.
Yeah.
Elise.
I'm a senior and I like math.
Thank you, Ridgeline. And now it's LC's turn. Let's start with their video.
Lewis and Clark, home of the Tigers. The most current iteration opened on April 14, 1912. Since then, Lewis and Clark has nurtured over a century of tradition of academic, artistic, musical, and athletic success. It is also home to over 1,700 students representing over 35 different language backgrounds. Its performing arts and theater groups are among the best, and LC offers a wide variety of advanced placement and dual enrollment opportunities, opening the door for graduates to go off to great places.
LC is known for its beautiful and historic auditorium.
And it has the only organ in the Civic building this side of the city.
LC also has an amazing art collection, valued at over $1 million.
LC has a four-faced clock tower, which was run by the original mechanism.
Lewis and Clark is a treasure of history that continues to blend the old with the new and prepare its Tigers for whatever comes next.
Thank you, Lewis and Clark. And now tell us a little bit about yourselves, your class year, and your favorite subject. Barun.
Hi, I'm a junior, and my favorite subject is biology.
Arun.
I'm a senior, my favorite subject is history.
Molly.
I'm a senior and my favorite subject is English.
And Owen.
I'm a senior and also biology.
All right. Thank you, both teams. We'll get back to the action next with the head-to-head round. It's time for the head-to-head round, but first, a change in score from our judges. On the question about changes in voting restrictions, age is an acceptable answer. Ridgeline is awarded 10 points, so the score is now Ridgeline 50 and LC 130. On to the head-to-head. In this round, we're in a new spot. That's because you'll go head-to-head one at a time. Just as with the last round, you must wait for me to finish asking the question, then you can buzz in to answer. Correct answers are worth 10 points. There are no deductions for wrong answers, and teams, you are not allowed to work together in this round. Are you ready? Let's go. Name two specific powers the Constitution lists for the President of the United States.
Veto bills and execute laws.
That is correct. Next. What three executive departments were created by the first Congress in 1789?
The Department of State, the Department of Treasury, and the Department of Justice.
Department of War, Department of War. Next. Which four presidents' faces are carved into Mount Rushmore in South Dakota?
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, and Abraham Lincoln.
That is correct. Which committee in the House of Representatives controls the flow of bills to the floor and sets conditions for their consideration there?
House Oversight Committee?
Incorrect.
Unsure.
House Rules Committee, House Rules Committee. Next. What does the free exercise clause in the First Amendment guarantee? He buzzed in.
Freely exercising religion.
That's correct. Next. What right forbids local, state, and federal agencies from acting unfairly, arbitrarily, or unreasonably?
Due process clause.
That is correct. What is eminent domain?
The government has right to all property for a fair deal, honestly.
That is correct. Next. What is required of the government if they take private property via eminent domain?
Fair compensation.
That is correct. Which constitutional amendment contains the Equal Protection Clause, which mandates that individuals in similar situations be treated equally by the law?
13.
Incorrect.
14.
That is correct. What was the 1896 Supreme Court case that ruled that the principle of separate but equal was legal?
Plessy v. Ferguson.
Correct. In what Supreme Court decision decades later did Justice Earl Warren state that separate is inherently unequal?
Brown v. Board of Education.
That is correct. What impact did the attack on Pearl Harbor have on the rights of many U.S. citizens of Japanese descent?
Their rights were, I guess, decreased. They were put in internment camps.
That is correct. And we are done. Okay, we'll get a scoring update in a minute, but another great round, and we're going to get ready for the category round, which is coming up next. Welcome back. It's time for the category round. In this round, teams will answer questions from the following categories: the First Continental Congress, freedom of speech, the cabinet, political influencers, and our role in lawmaking. Each category has 5 questions that increase in point value from 10 to 30. Teams will alternate choosing a category. You can pick any category, however, you cannot jump ahead in point value. Points are deducted for wrong answers in this round. You will work together to answer each question. There's some strategy involved in this round. You can pass on a question, which means you can choose not to answer, and no points will be deducted. You can also toss a question to the other team. The receiving team is then forced to answer that question and either win or lose the associated points. But you can only toss a question 3 times, so use them wisely. Let's remind everyone of the score. Ridgeline 110, Lewis and Clark 170. Teams, if you're ready, let's begin.
We'll take freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech for 10. Once again, here's author Sharma Shields.
A lot has changed since the U.S. Constitution was first written. What are 3 forms of communication that did not exist when the First Amendment was penned?
Television, radio. Yeah. Social media.
Television, radio, and social media, or internet.
Television, radio, and social media are correct. LC?
We'll go First Continental Congress for 10.
First Continental Congress for 10. In 1774, why did American colonists convene the First Continental Congress?
Huh? We'll pass.
Okay, pass. So the answer is because in 1774, the British Parliament had passed laws to punish colonists for troubles in Boston and elsewhere. Ridgeline.
We'll take freedom of speech for 15.
Which of the following media formats can be most regulated according to the Supreme Court? Movies, newspapers, radio, cable television.
We're going to say cable television.
That is incorrect. Radio. LC?
Political influencers for 10, please.
Political influencers for 10. What is a term for citizens who band together to try to influence government policies?
Interest groups?
That is correct. Ridgeline?
We'll take the cabinet for 10.
Cabinet for 10. Which department in the president's cabinet is the largest?
The Department of State.
That is incorrect. Department of Defense. LC?
What do you guys want to do? We'll do influencers for 15, please.
Influencers for 15. Name one way in which interest groups differ from political parties.
Interest groups try to typically donate to political parties and advocate for their political parties to uphold their positions.
That is correct. Ridgeline.
We'll do influencers for 20.
Influencers for 20. Name one positive impact interest groups can have on the political system.
They can advocate for minority groups and voice opinions.
That is correct. LC.
What do you guys want? We'll do the cabinet for 15.
Cabinet for 15. Which cabinet department of the federal government includes the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration?
The Department of Health and Human Services.
That is correct. Ridgeline.
We'll take our role in lawmaking.
For 10 points, and here's EWU President Sherry McMahon with your video question.
What do we call the process in which citizens can make and remake their laws directly, providing a check over their legislatures?
We're going to pass on that one.
All right. The answer is direct legislation. Okay. LC.
What do you want, guys? What? We'll do First Continental Congress 15.
First Continental Congress for 15. Where did the First Continental Congress meet?
Okay. Philadelphia?
That is correct.
Yes.
Ridgeline.
We'll take First Continental Congress.
First Continental Congress for 20. True or false? At the convening of the First Continental Congress, most of the delegates favored independence from Britain.
False.
That is correct. LC.
Cabinet for 20.
Cabinet for 20. In 1933, after more than 300 cabinet officers had been chosen by 31 presidents, Franklin Roosevelt appointed the first woman as a cabinet secretary. What department did she head?
The Department of Labor.
That is correct. That's the end of the round. Great round, teams. The points add up fast in this round. Let's check the score. Ridgeline 135, Lewis and Clark 245. Only one round remains, the lightning round. And it's coming up next.
Considered the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution has 4,400 words and is the oldest and shortest written constitution of any major government in the world. Near the framer's signature at the end, there is a glaring misspelling of which state? A. Massachusetts. B. Virginia. C. Pennsylvania. D. New York. Do you know the answer? Follow the QR code on your screen or go to ksps.org/civicsbowl to submit your answer and be entered into a drawing to win a prize. The deadline to enter is Monday at noon. And please, you're on the honor system here. No Googling. We will contact the winner directly and let you all know the right answer next week on Civics Bowl.
We're just one round from learning who will be the first team to advance to the semifinals, the Civics Bowl tournament this season. In the lightning round, we'll put 90 seconds on the clock. This is your chance to answer as many questions as you can in that time. Each question is worth 20 points. Points are deducted for wrong answers. You answer individually in this round. No conferring is allowed. Let's get a final check on the score. Lewis and Clark, 245. Ridgeline, 135. Teams, are you ready? Yes. Let's go. Who is currently considered to be the Democratic Party's leader? Arun.
Joe Biden.
That is correct. True or false? The U.S. Constitution calls for a presidential election to be held every 4 years. Parker.
True.
That is correct. What are the three basic kinds of U.S. governmental power? Legislative, executive, and judicial. Pictured here, where does the U.S. executive branch reside? Parker.
The White House.
That is correct. In a democracy, who holds supreme political authority? Arun.
The people.
That is correct. What ancient civilization is considered to have had the first democracy? Varun.
Ancient Greece.
Yes. What English political theorist promoted the idea of the natural rights of all men, which include rights to life, liberty, and property? Arun.
John Locke.
Correct. True or false, before colonists began to learn about the art of government, several Native American tribes had created a successful system to end conflict? Parker.
True.
Correct. What is the name given to the power of a court to determine constitutionality of a governmental action? Or Jacob.
Constitutional review.
Judicial review. True or false, the Supreme Court is the only court specifically outlined in the U.S. Constitution? Parker.
True.
Correct. What is the term for false or malicious use of the spoken word? Arun.
Libel.
Slander. Are children born to foreign immigrants residing in the U.S. automatically citizens of the United States? Jacob?
Yes.
Correct. And that is the wrap up. The score at a 305 for Lewis and Clark and Ridgeline 215. And that means that Lewis and Clark will advance to the semifinals. We won't know who you'll face for a couple of weeks. Congratulations, both teams. Join us next week when the Community School and Ferris High School fight to advance to the Civics Bowl tournament. We hope you enjoyed playing along from home. See you next week.
The Civics Bowl is made possible by Eastern Washington University, Canopy Credit Union, the Avista Foundation, the League of Women Voters of the Spokane area and of Washington, and by viewers like you. If you are a regional school interested in taking part in Civics Bowl next year, we want to know. Go to ksps.org/civicsbowl to fill out our online contact form.